Welcome to Kadampa Podcasts. These podcasts offer practical solutions to daily challenges and help guide us to a happier and more peaceful state of mind. In each episode, you will find an extract from a teaching given by one of various Kadampa Buddhist teachers worldwide. All these teachings are inspired by the profound wisdom of Venerable Geshe Khalsang Gyatso Rinpoche, a Buddhist master for our time. We hope you will enjoy listening.
So there's three root delusions the Buddha talked about. Three root, what we call delusions, meaning distorted states of mind that make us unpeaceful, unhappy, uncontrolled, and cause us to perform actions that create negative karma. And those are attachment, anger, and ignorance. Actually, ignorance is first. From our ignorance comes our attachment and our anger. Often we're angry on the basis of what we're attached to. We'll spend some time on that later on in this series, that the connection between the levels at which we're attached and the levels to which we set ourselves up to be angry, because those are connected. But these are like our three root delusions. So when we're getting angry, what happens? Like he says here, anger is a deluded mind. So a deluded mind means a distorted mind. We're seeing things in a distorted way. That's the starting place. This is another reason why we don't trust this state of mind as reliable to follow, is it's based on some exaggeration or distortion. We're distorting reality. We're not actually seeing the situation clearly or broadly. We're looking at little pieces of it in a very narrow way, and then we're embellishing them. So he says anger is a deluded mind, meaning a distorted mind that focuses on an animate or inanimate object. So this means that we can get angry at anything or anyone. You know, we can be angry with the traffic. We can be angry with, a difficult coworker. We can be angry with our children, our loved ones. We can be angry with a printer and with a paperclip. We can be angry at anything, right? With the mind of anger, it doesn't discriminate. It could be a person, place, or thing, right? And anything can be the object of our anger. And what happens is, on the basis of a distorted mind, we focus on an animate or inanimate object, and we feel it to be unattractive. This is the first step. We develop aversion. We don't like something. Again, this can be in reference to our attachment to what we do like, right? So we're disappointed with what we're encountering because it's not what we want, or it's not what we like. So that's where our preferences can sometimes, if we're attached to them, lead to anger. So we focus on something in a way that usually means looking at its faults, looking at what we dislike about it, and we develop a sour feeling. We feel it to be unattractive. We develop aversion. We feel dislike or displeased with. That's not full-blown anger, but it's good to notice if we're watching our mind when we start to feel displeasure, or we're souring to something, maybe like some unpleasant feeling coming. Because if we're not careful, if we let that feeling remain, that state of mind remain, it will turn into anger eventually. So it's a good place to sort of stop the process and switch gears, because at that stage it's not full-blown anger, but there's like a little ember, like a little warm stirring beginning when we focus on a fault. We're like, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. So again, within this first step, what we need to understand is kind of a bigger, broader, and this is where I have to be careful not to get too excited and go off on a tangent, but is a bigger, broader point about the role our mind plays in our experience of things. Because a lot of our anger is based upon a dynamic whereby we feel there's something out there that is unpleasant, right? That's trying to harm us, or that's in some way, an obstacle to our happiness, and it's coming at us. It has nothing to do with our state of mind, and we're the victim. This is another reason Buddhists don't trust a mind of anger, because we victimize ourselves with it. Everyone else is a perpetrator, and we're always the victim. So we're actually relating to ourselves when we're angry in a weakened state. And it's a subtler point. It's one that requires some thought. But if we check, that's where we're coming from when we're angry. Like that defensiveness. We're relating to ourselves as weak. But what we also aren't understanding is the role our mind is playing in creating that dynamic. So we automatically assume it's this thing out there that's unattractive, or it's this thing out there that's displeasing or dislikable. Even when that very same thing on another occasion, we have a different experience of. So say we're angry with our partner. We think it's them that's somehow irritating. Like they're irritating. They left their socks on the floor again. Or they keep leaving the toothpaste cap off the toothpaste container, and then it makes the toothpaste thing all sticky and gross, right? And we're sort of like, they're irritating. They have these faults, these mistakes, and we develop this displeasure towards them. And we think that there's something displeasing about them, like within them, like they're inherently displeasing. When the truth is, on another occasion, with a different state of mind, completely opposite experience of them. We love them, we adore them, we think they're sweet, we think they're beautiful, we're happy to be with them, we want them around. When they're not there, we're like, when are you coming back? Right? We have a different experience. So all of this points to that our mind is different, right? Our mind is different. So maybe when we're irritated with them, it's not that they're irritating, maybe it's that we're irritable. That's one thing to contemplate. Maybe we're irritable. And then with that irritable state of mind, we see them as irritating. But it's not that from their side, they're inherently irritating. I'm bringing this up because it can kind of loosen our grip, which helps us deal with anger, where we're like, okay, I can change my mind and I can change my experience. Whereas if it really is they're unattractive from their side, then it wouldn't matter what we did with our mind. We'd be forced, like a victim, into experiencing them in a particular way. Whereas Buddha is saying, no, you have freedom. This is where you have freedom. Where your mind goes, how your mind reacts, is the only thing you have freedom to change or control. And so luckily that can change or control our experience. So when we're feeling somebody to be unattractive or something to be unattractive in the development of anger, that's coming from focusing exclusively on faults. So if at this point we were to sort of notice or watch, like, oh, I'm beginning to sour towards this person, dislike them, instead of going full force in that direction further, we can like pause and think, I don't want that mental disturbance. I don't want the burden or the weight of having those unpleasant feelings towards that situation or that person. So I want to do something to change my mind. So the first thing we would do is to try to recognize that we're focusing on their faults exclusively, or the faults of a circumstance, and try to balance it by focusing on some good qualities. Because a balanced mind can consider many things at once, whereas an angry mind, like I said, is very narrow, is just focused on a few points that feed the narrative of our aversion. So at this point, we could start to expand our mind and think, okay, well, what are their good qualities? I had one teacher who used to say, and I always thought this was a good point, for every fault you find in a person, find 3 good qualities if you want your mind to stay balanced. Because we tend to feel that the negativities of faults we find way more in our mind. For some reason, we give them more value or more validity. So we need like at least 3 good qualities to just stay balanced. Just stay balanced towards a situation, a person, a thing. So at this stage, when we feel something to be unattractive, we can start to notice this. This is like the beginnings of anger. Then the next step, the second stage, is we exaggerate the faults we found, or the bad qualities. We exaggerate them. We ruminate on them. We obsess on them. We get stuck on them. We go over them again and again and again and again. We think about them. We talk about them until we get ourselves in a fervor. This is what we call inappropriate attention, where we pay an inappropriate amount of attention to something, and it stimulates a disturbed state of mind, a negative mind. So say, for example, somebody said something we found offensive, where they implied something like a sniff of a whiff of an insult, right? In a passing conversation. But we noted it, we clocked it, and we're like, what are they trying to say? Now, we could let it go at that point, right? We could let it go. But if we don't, what starts to happen is we hang on to that one sniff of a whiff of an insult, and we go over it in our head. What do they mean by that? I think they meant this by that. Like, we start to analyze it in a way that is not required to comprehend. Like, this is why it's called inappropriate attention. It's not just paying attention to things going on and what somebody says or does. It's that we pay an inappropriate amount of attention, where we get stuck on it and we ruminate. We dwell there. And if we keep going back to it again and again and again, we start to then very easily develop a mind of anger. So the third stage, so on the basis of this process of exaggerating, right, or ruminating, then eventually we generate this sort of textbook definition of anger, where we develop a wish to harm. Because that process of inappropriate attention creates so much mental disturbance, so much pain, we want to push away. So the nature of anger is to want to reject. What's so funny, though, is we can't fulfill the wishes of our anger. So our anger wants to push away to harm, but the very nature of that mind is to be very sticky and not be able to let go. So we want to get away from what we're angry with, but we can't, because the nature of that mind is to be obsessed with. Like, we see this all the time, in exaggerated forms of anger, when people do things that are really harmful to somebody that they're angry with. Really what it is they're trying to get away. They want to harm, they want to push away, but they can't do that, right? So then they end up harming that person. So this is the kind of full-blown anger, is when we have a wish to harm. So he gives an example of this process here in the following sentences. He said, for example, when we are angry with our partner, at that moment he or she appears to us unattractive or unpleasant. We then exaggerate his or her bad qualities by focusing only on those aspects that irritate us and ignoring all their good qualities and kindness, until we have built up a mental image of an intrinsically faulty person. We then wish to harm him or her in some way, probably by criticizing or disparaging them. Because it is based on an exaggeration, anger is an unrealistic mind. The intrinsically faulty person or thing that it focuses on does not in fact exist. Moreover, as we will see, anger is also an extremely destructive mind that serves no useful purpose whatsoever. Having understood the nature and disadvantages of anger, we then need to watch our mind carefully at all times in order to recognize it whenever it begins to arise. So explaining this process a little bit more is a section in Introduction to Buddhism that I find really helpful. So he says here, we can see from our own experience how much suffering arises from anger. It prevents us from judging a situation correctly, and it causes us to act in regrettable ways. Right? So we can see this from our own experience. Through that process of a distorted view, looking at faults, exaggerating them, and then wishing to harm, we can easily judge a situation incorrectly, because we have this paranoid version of reality. I remember watching this scenario play out when another temple I used to work at, teach at, there was a crosswalk. And I was at this park next to the crosswalk, and I was watching as these two kids who had been in the park, they were crossing the street. But one of the kids was disabled, so he had a hard time walking. He had this brace. He couldn't walk very well. And so his friend was helping him, cross the street, go to the park and then go back home. And there was this truck that came. It was like a four-way stop. This truck had come, and it had stopped. It's kind of high up. And I don't think it could see that the boy's legs were damaged, that he was disabled. So, he stopped at the crosswalk and the boys are crossing. But the driver is getting really impatient, right? Really impatient. And as I'm observing, I'm realizing that he's judging the situation incorrectly. So he's thinking that the boys are intentionally going slowly to make him wait. So he starts honking the horn and yelling at them, right, through the window. And then as the boys got past the height of the car into the next lane, and he could actually see them and see the boys' legs, you could see his whole face drop, this man, the driver. He suddenly realized, oh, I judged this situation really incorrectly. Because the boy that was helping the disabled boy is looking at the driver what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you, sir? Look at this. We're doing the best we can. And you can see as soon as the driver saw he just realized, like, I'm sure he felt like an idiot. I'm sure he felt terrible. So why did he judge that situation incorrectly? Impatient mind, angry mind, right? Looking at that object, that person, focusing on the fault, which was the perceived, idea that they're taking too long, making him wait, exaggerating it, like exaggerating that it was this intentional thing. They were intentionally, that's a whole exaggeration, isn't it? That idea that they're trying to make him wait longer. Like that's their intention through the crosswalk, is that they're just there to drive him crazy. That's what they're trying to do. That wasn't their intention at all. But in that angry, paranoid world, very quick process, right? But in that angry, paranoid world, that's how the situation's interpreted. And then a wish to harm arises in the form of like honking the horn, yelling profanities, and then suddenly coming to realize that you've made a big mistake. So what Buddha said is that because anger is a distorted mind, it doesn't ever see the full situation correctly. It's only seen one version, and that version is distorted. So it's a little bit like trying to assess your appearance in one of those carnival mirrors. Like, have you ever been in one of those carnival mirrors where you stand in front of this funny mirror, and if you move one direction, you look like you're, 7 feet tall and 110 pounds, right? And then you move in a different direction, it looks like you're 3 feet tall and 250 pounds. Like, if you were to go out and buy clothes based on that reflection in a mirror, you'd be making a big mistake, right? It's a mistaken reflection. It's not an accurate representation of what your body looks like. So if you were to go on the basis of it, there would be problems. So in a similar way with anger, we don't judge situations accurately or correctly because our mind's clouded by the angry version of events, the way in which we're seeing a situation. So he talks a little bit further about this. It destroys our own peace of mind and disturbs everyone else we meet. So we can see this, if we check when we have anger present, where is our peace of mind? It's almost impossible, isn't it, to have peace of mind when we're angry. It totally disrupts us. Even if we're in a place we would normally enjoy, we can't enjoy. There's a couple that was coming to some classes I was doing a long time ago, and they had gone on a trip to Hawaii. And when they came back, I said, "Oh, how was the trip?" And they said, "It was terrible." And so I immediately assumed like something had gone wrong with the trip, like the weather was bad or the hotel was. I'm like, "Oh, what happened? Like, was resort bad or whatever?" Like, anger. And they told me they were laughing about it. So like obviously they came to terms with it, but they were describing how the very first night, I started the first night they arrived, they'd gone for this beautiful kind of, tiki torch beachside restaurant, first night in Hawaii, and the boyfriend or husband felt that the waiter was paying a little too much attention to the woman, and that she was a little too receptive to the waiter's positive attention. So he got a little jealous, and that jealousy turned into anger. And so then they got an argument. They were at odds. And so they're describing how they're in this beautiful place, this amazing food, and they're like completely uncomfortable because they're angry with each other. So they both described how like the first date was like arguing, like they argued that night, like I wasn't, flirting with him, and he's like, yes, you were, right? So they're arguing, right? And then the next date was just silent treatment. But they had all this itinerary they had to follow. So they had like the helicopter trip through the waterfalls, scuba diving. So they had all the stuff they prepaid for to do, and they were doing all these things while angry with each other, giving each other the silent treatment. So there they are, swimming with the dolphins, but like they're angry with each other. They're on the boat, angry with each other. They're in the helicopter, angry with each other, And so this went on. I think the trip was a 5-day trip, but they said they didn't reconcile till the 4th day. So they did all of the things that they'd planned for months and spent money on, and it was miserable, right? Why? Because there was no peace of mind. There's no peace of mind. And when there's no peace of mind, there's no enjoyment. So we all know, like, we want to be happy. We want to enjoy. What stops us from doing that? Often it's anger, isn't it? We can't even sleep. We can't enjoy food. We can't enjoy company when we're angry.
If you feel inspired by this podcast, then dive deeper into timeless wisdom of modern Kadampa Buddhism by following the link in the episode description. We look forward to reconnecting with you in the next episode of Kadampa Podcasts.